Hey guys, welcome to the One Place YouTube channel. If this is your first time here, make sure you click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you'll know every time we post a new video. Also, if you guys have any prayer requests, make sure to leave them down in the comments and we'll be praying for you guys this week. Now, enjoy the sermon.
Have you ever heard a phrase, like maybe a saying, and wondered where it came from? Like maybe who originated that statement? I'll give you an example. Something like, you ever heard the statement, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, right? You ever wonder, like, where do these things come from? Like, who originated that? So we're going to take that particular phrase, for example, and kind of just build on that. That phrase, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, that phrase was attributed to and made popular by President Harry Truman. He used it multiple times during his presidency, and he used it to suggest that leaders like himself must be able to handle pressure and criticism. And the literal image is that a kitchen is hot, right? Especially, we didn't always have AC, right? We didn't always have fans, but the kitchen is typically hot, which makes you uncomfortable and sometimes even chaotic, right? At times, when you're busy, you're trying to put stuff out, and not everyone can stand being in the kitchen. So President Truman was like, hey, you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, right? That's where it came from. There's a euphemism that we use today called taking heat or facing heat. You ever heard of someone that, like, hey, I'm facing heat right now. I'm taking a lot of heat. You ever heard that before? That's when someone is dealing with intense pressure, intense stress or criticism, or they're dealing with a difficult situation, often in a challenging or confrontational way. To take heat is to be the target of criticism, the target of accusation or pressure because of a certain situation. Have you ever had to take heat for something? Anybody? The NBA playoffs are happening right now. Anybody NBA fans? Okay. So this is going to go right over your heads. Sorry. But I'm going to say it because it's written down. Really? No one's an NBA fan? All right. Yay. Thank you. We got one. You're going to receive. Hey, you got something good to eat. God has something good for you. But the NBA playoffs are happening right now. And the New York Knicks just made the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 1999. And I really don't keep up with the NBA a whole lot myself, but when it comes playoff time, to me, playoff time is a fun time for all sports. It's just fun to watch the best of the best play at each other and get at each other's throats and get mad at each other, and the strongest one prevails. But I recently saw a video of the Knicks fans celebrating in the streets. Now, that's typical New York, right? I mean, you don't win championships. You go to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then that's something to celebrate, right? I mean, we know a little bit more of what we can celebrate here in Houston. Sorry. But there had to be thousands upon thousands of people out in the street celebrating their team going to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, let me put that in perspective for some of you that don't know. Eastern Conference Finals isn't the finals, okay? This is just, you're going to get to play for the finals. You're going to get to play for a championship if you get through the Eastern Conference Finals. So it kind of just, it surprises me that they were so excited and they were rioting in the streets just because they're going for the possibility. But, they haven't had much to cheer about lately. But the Knicks are going to be facing the Indiana Pacers to see who will go to the finals to play for the championship. And in this crowd, there just happened to be one guy who decided to go to the game that day or decided to be out there, and he was wearing a Pacers jersey, okay? And in the video, you see this angry mob, and this one guy, this Pacer fan, he's probably right there at that exit sign, and I'm the mob, okay? And he's just kind of like laughing, but he's walking away. And as he's walking away, this mob becomes angry, and they start chasing him. And they're not just chasing him, they're throwing trash at him, like trash bags at him and chasing after him. I can imagine that it was a very crazy and scary scene for that guy. That is kind of like what it looks like to take heat, all right? That's extreme, but that dude he was taking some heat because he was wearing a Pacers jersey. He was a Pacers fan in Knicks territory. So this is what's happening in one of the churches that we're going to look at. We're in a series right now called Dear Church, where we're looking at the 7 letters written to the 7 churches in Revelation. And today we're going to be talking about the church of Smyrna, all right? And this is what's happening in the church of Smyrna for the Christians. They're living in a culture that lives and believes completely differently than they do. Okay, Smyrna was a large and beautiful city about 35 miles north of Ephesus. We talked about the church of Ephesus last week. Smyrna was about 35 miles north of Ephesus, and it was also a really well-known city. It was a beautiful city. It was actually known as the Jewel of Asia because of its beauty. And it was a wealthy city, and it was known for its trade. It sat on the Aegean Sea, and it was known for trade. It was known for its wealth, but it was also a very religious city. It was dedicated to idol worship of the Roman Empire and the Roman emperor. That's who they worshiped. And they were dedicated to Rome, and they were a leading city in the worship of the Roman emperor. And in AD 23, Smyrna, the city, won the privilege over 11 other cities to build the very first temple to worship the Emperor Tiberius Caesar. In Rome, they didn't mind that you served other gods, as long as you recognize Caesar as Lord above all other lords. You can recognize, you could worship, but as long as you say, "Hail Caesar, Lord of Lords," they didn't care. The city also had a large Jewish population that was very hostile towards Christians who lived in Smyrna, and knew these Jewish leaders and these Jewish people knew how to manipulate the system and the Roman leaders to get what they wanted. So you have this church in Smyrna, these Christians, they're not just countercultural, they're hated. And they're seen as an enemy of the state because they serve someone that they believe is Lord of Lords and King of Kings. So they're not just countercultural, they're hated. They're hated by the Romans, they're hated by the Jews, they're hated. The name Smyrna derives from one of the city's biggest trade commodities, which was myrrh. Myrrh came from the fruit of a thorn bush, and when the flower was picked and it was crushed, it would let off this amazing aroma that would be used for perfume and embalming dead bodies. This was the same myrrh that was given to Jesus as a baby. It was a prophetic gift that would point to his purpose to die for our sins. And this is exactly what's happening to the church in Smyrna. They're being crushed by persecution. They're being crushed economically. They're being crushed by slander and lies about them. And they lived in fear for their very lives. But their response to the crushing released in the spirit realm this sweet-smelling fragrance that caught the attention of Jesus. And so he writes them this letter through John to encourage them. We're going to be looking at Revelations 2, verses 8 through 11. I'm going to start with Revelations 2, 8, and 9. It says, "And to the angel of the church of Smyrna, write, the words of the first and the last, who died and came to life. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich. And the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan." I want to stop there for a second. Jesus is writing this letter to encourage a suffering church. They're suffering in persecution. They're suffering in tribulation. They've got a lot of stuff on their plate. And he starts off by reminding them who he is. Every letter, Jesus would start off by giving himself a title that would reflect what was going on in that particular church. And he starts off by reminding them who he is by using a title that they would be familiar with from the book of Isaiah. If you look at the book of Isaiah, chapters 41, 44, and I believe 46, God uses this title, I am the first and the last. He does this so that these words, that they know that these words are coming from him directly. Yes, they may have been written down by John, but they were spoken by him to the church in Smyrna. It's a personal thing for them. Can you imagine being in that situation in the church of Smyrna, being crushed because you believe in Jesus, and all of a sudden you receive a letter from the very Jesus you serve? Can you imagine the immediate encouragement? Like, okay, all right, this is some encouragement that flooded their souls when they realize they're hearing and that they're also known by the one that they're suffering for. Then he says to them, hey, this is who I am. Hey, I know. I know what's going on. I know your tribulation. I know your poverty. I know what you're going through. He empathizes with them. He says, I know. Jesus knows. He knew back then, and I want to encourage you this morning that if you're struggling, you're not alone. He knows. He knows what you're going through. He sees what you're going through. Jesus knew because he's God, right? And he knows and sees all things. He sees what they're going through. He sees what's happening in their lives. He's present. He's watching. It doesn't take him by surprise. When you're going through stuff, doesn't it feel encouraging sometimes just to be seen? Doesn't it feel encouraging just to be known, to know like, hey, I see you. I know what you're going through. Isn't that encouraging sometimes? Have you ever had to do this where you're like, look, I need to talk to somebody, but I don't need your advice. I just need to talk. Isn't it encouraging sometimes just to have a listening ear? That's what they have in Jesus. But there's more to this than just being seen. When Jesus says, I know, he means more than just, I see you. Jesus knows how they feel because Jesus went through the same kind of sufferings that they're going through. Jesus went through suffering too. Jesus was persecuted. Jesus was slandered. Jesus was chased out of town. Jesus was cursed at and yelled at. Jesus was spit upon. Jesus was beaten. Jesus was even killed and buried. And so when he says, I'm the first and the last, not only is he pointing to the fact that he is God, but he's saying, I went through all this stuff that you're going through, all the suffering, all the persecuting, and I'm still standing. I'm the first and I'm the last. I'm still here. Caesars will come and go, Church of Smyrna, but I'm still standing. Empires will rise and fall, Church of Smyrna, but I'm still here. I'm the first and I'll be the last. And that's encouraging to know. I was dead, but now I'm alive. They killed me, but I conquered death. And whatever man can do to you, I have the power to undo. This is the encouragement that Jesus is pouring in to his suffering church. Jesus said in John 11, 25, 26, I am resurrection and life. Anyone who believes in me, anyone who has faith in me, even after dying, everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never, ever die. Why? Because he overcame death. Jesus is saying to them, not only do I see you, but I've been there and I'm still standing. Death couldn't hold me, and if you stay faithful to me, it won't hold you either. And this had to be encouraging. Sometimes it helps to try to just put yourself in the shoes of what these people were going through. This had to be encouraging to them because Jesus was speaking directly to their situation. These people were facing death. They weren't just facing, oh, you may lose your job or you may do this. No, they were facing life and death. And Jesus is speaking directly to their situation. He's talking to a church that's doing everything right, and they're suffering for it. That doesn't seem fair, right? And this letter is written to them to encourage them. He says, I know your tribulation. I know your poverty. This word tribulation means pressed together or pressed down. Christians in Smyrna were under constant pressure to belittle the lordship of Christ by the Romans. Hey, let's magnify Caesar above. You can serve Jesus as long as you recognize that Caesar is Lord of all. If you don't, we're going to persecute you. They were under constant pressure by the Romans to belittle Christ in their life. They were under constant pressure from the Jewish population to completely reject the Lord as their Christ. To give you an example of what some of them had to go through, once a year, a Roman citizen would burn a pinch of incense. They just get a little pinch of incense, and they would burn it on the altar to the Godhead of Caesar. And when they did, they would receive a certificate to guarantee that they had performed their religious duty to Caesar in Rome. That was their acknowledgement. Hey, I'll do this little thing. I'll acknowledge Caesar as my Lord, and then I'll go and do my own thing. That's all the Christians had to do. But they couldn't. They couldn't do it. They refused because they were faithful to believe that only Jesus was Lord of Lords. They couldn't put anyone or anything else above him. They wouldn't bow, so they were persecuted. They couldn't get jobs. They were the outcasts of society. They lived in poverty. Jesus says, I know your poverty. This word poverty didn't mean that they barely had enough to get by and survive. This kind of poverty was extreme poverty. This word was extreme. They were destitute. They couldn't even afford the basic necessities to live. Can you imagine? Put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself, could I stand the heat? They couldn't even afford the basic necessities to live. They couldn't get a job to make a living. They couldn't pay their bills. They couldn't even eat because of their faith in Jesus. Part of the reason why they couldn't get a job was because the Jewish population was very influential and knew how to manipulate the Roman leaders, so they were getting it from all sides. They would slander the Christians and tell lies about them in order to persecute them. This word slander means to speak against another in an effort to injure them. Doesn't that sound familiar? This is exactly what the Jewish leaders did to Jesus. They slandered and blasphemed him to the point that he was nailed to a cross and killed. So when Jesus says, I know, he means it. He doesn't say, I know it here. No, I know it here. I know it here. I know it here. I know it here. I know what you're going through. Jesus not only sees, but he knows how you feel because he's been through suffering too. Jesus knew what it felt like to be under pressure. Remember, Garden of Gethsemane? He felt extreme pressure in the Garden of Gethsemane to the point that he was sweating blood. The pressure to reject what God had sent him, God the Father had sent him to do. Jesus is under pressure in this Garden of Gethsemane where they would take olives and they would press them. Jesus is being pressed. Pressure to reject what God has and the plan that God has for him. And yet he refused. He stayed strong, stayed faithful. Jesus knew what it felt like to be poor. 2 Corinthians 8:9 explains that. Says, you know the generous grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that by his poverty he could make you and me rich. That's when Jesus says, oh, I see your poverty, I know but you're rich. I know your poverty, but you're rich. What were they rich in? Everything pointed to their poverty, their extreme poverty. What is Jesus talking about? Jesus doesn't see just the outward appearance. He sees the whole picture, right? They were rich in him. They had salvation. They had hope. They had his peace. They had joy. They had the family of God. They had God as their Father. They had Jesus as their intercessor. And they had the Holy Spirit as their advocate. They weren't alone. Jesus knew what it was like to be blasphemed, slandered, and lied about. See, it's easy to think that God has forgotten you or doesn't see you when you face trouble. But he sees you and he knows you. And I think that's what the Lord wants you to know this morning, is that he understands that we deal with stuff, that we may not be experiencing the tribulations and the persecution that the church of Smyrna was dealing with, but he doesn't belittle what you're going through. If your heart is broken, his heart is broken too. He sees you and he knows. So if you walked into this place and you're suffering, please open your hearts and your ears to hear what God is saying. He's saying, I know. I know. Many of us wonder why we face trouble at all in this world, right? It's not fair. Why? When we're doing everything right, God, we're doing everything right. We're reading our Bibles, we're praying, we're coming to church, we're serving, we're paying our tithe. Everything we're doing is right. We're by the book. And we do it because we love you even, not because we feel like we have to, but it comes from a heart of gratitude. So why do we have to suffer? Why do you let things happen to us? Why do bad things happen, God? Some of us have been taught this belief that if we have enough faith, then nothing will happen. Nothing bad will ever happen to us. And I want to squash that this morning. Not to give you bad news, but just to be real with you. That's just not true. It's not true. You can have faith the size of a mustard seed. You can have faith the size of a mountain, and you're still going to have trouble in this life. Jesus said that we would never face that. He didn't say that we would never face trouble. He actually said the opposite. He told the disciples, John 15:20, he said, a slave is not greater than the master. Since they persecuted me, naturally they're going to persecute you. You're going to go through persecution for your faith, unless you hide your faith and you blend in. But if you stand for your faith, you're going to be persecuted in this life. John 16:33, Jesus said, here on earth, you're going to have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. You're going to face trouble. You're going to face hardships. It's a part of our life. Some of these bad things happen because we live in a broken world. I would say most of the stuff happens because we live in a broken, sinful world. Some things happen because of our poor choices that we've made. And because of those poor choices that we've made, it presents just regular consequences. And we have to deal with those consequences. But some things also happen because God allows them to happen. Not because he's bad, but because he's good. He allows them to happen in order to test us, in order to develop us, to prepare us for something greater. We'll read that in a little bit when Jesus expresses that to them in the church in Smyrna. In 2 Corinthians 2:1, 3, and 4, we see how he uses our trouble to comfort us so we may comfort others down the line. In James 1, we read how God will test our faith to grow us and perfect us. In 2 Corinthians 12, we read about Paul's thorn in his flesh. He calls it a messenger of Satan that was sent to harass him and keep him from becoming conceited. He asked the Lord in this particular story, he said he asked the Lord 3 times to take it away. And all God would say to him was, my grace is sufficient for you, Paul, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Sometimes we're tested so we can acknowledge and see our weakness. That trouble was sent to keep him humble and to keep him accountable. Sometimes God will allow things to happen in our lives to test us or to use it to keep us in line. I remember one time in my life, I was dealing with some things, and I don't want to go into detail about it because it's personal, but these things kept coming up to me over and over again, and I just did not understand why I had this one thing keep bothering me after years and years of just like, this happened years ago. Why is it still bubbling up to the surface? And I remember talking to a friend of mine and telling him about that. And he said, you know, Chip, he said, Paul had a thorn in his flesh to keep him accountable. And maybe God is using this in your life because he wants to keep it on the forefront of your mind because it's a weakness, and he wants to make sure that you remember what he's called you to be. And he's using it to humble you, and he's using it to keep you accountable. And that opened my eyes, and honestly, to be honest with you, it brought such peace to my life. Because it's like, okay, I can handle it if there's a purpose, right? But if the devil's just using that to sabotage me and to torment me, I can't take that. God, you need to deliver me from that. But God, if you're using it for a purpose, I can take that. I want to be held accountable. I want to be humbled by the Lord. Sometimes it helps to know that there's purpose for something. Sometimes it's good to know that it won't always be like this. There's hope beyond this, and there's a greater plan, even when I don't understand what's going on. Even I don't understand the full plan. And some of us, the hardships that we face, we won't understand it until we get to heaven. We just won't. But with God, there's always a purpose from suffering. There's always a purpose from our suffering. And it's always for our good. It's not because he's ready to punish you or because he's mad at you. It's to develop us. It's to strengthen us. It's sometimes to protect us. We want something so bad and I want to have it. And God is saying that's going to hurt you down the line, and so I have to protect you from that. Or it's to prepare us for what he has for us. Revelations 2:10, Jesus continues. He says, do not fear for what you are about to suffer. Now, I don't know about you, but if I didn't get that, I'd be afraid. I'd be shaking in my boots. But when the first and the last is standing and he's speaking to me, that would fill me with such courage. Don't fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested. God is allowing it so that they would be tested. And for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. For the church in Smyrna, God is allowing tribulation and persecution to happen in order to test their faith. The heat that they're facing is actually purifying the church. It's purifying the individuals, and it's purifying the church as a whole. And God will use the heat of suffering to grow and purify our faith, to reveal true faith, or if there is a lack of faith, he'll use it to separate the committed people from the half-hearted people, those that are truly committed and those that are all talk, because he's got to purify his church. He's got to purify his bride. He's got to make his bride beautiful for his and prepare her for his return. He'll use fire. He'll use the heat of suffering to reveal our strengths and our weaknesses. Not because he hates us or he wants to be mean, but he wants us to succeed. He wants us to overcome. How else can we endure unless we are tested and we pass the test? First Peter 1, 6 and 7 says, "So be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world." He's purifying our faith. He's making it genuine. Tests are important. Tests are just a part of life, right? You wouldn't get into a car if they told you, hey, drive this car, get it, see how fast it can go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. But they said, oh, but we haven't tested the brakes yet. If you would, you'd be a dummy, right? That's what they use the dummies for. But seriously, so why wouldn't God test our faith to strengthen it? Why wouldn't God purify our faith to make it genuine? The purity of our faith depends on the heat we face and the heat that we overcome. How do we overcome? I mean, we overcome through Jesus, right? I mean, it's really simple. We make it more difficult. That no matter what we face, we stay faithful to him. We believe him. We trust him. We run to him. We trust him. We put our hope in him. That's what faith is, right? Hebrews 11, confidence in what Jesus said that we can't quite see or comprehend in the moment, but we trust you, God. We trust you because you've been faithful before. We trust you because we saw you faithful to our mom and dad. We trust you because we saw you faithful to our friends, and you're a respecter of no person, and so you're good and we trust you. Even though we can't see it, we trust you. That's what faith is. And the more you trust, the stronger your faith becomes. Suffering is uncomfortable, but it's necessary to strengthen our faith. We may not be suffering like the church of Smyrna, but we do suffer, right? So how do we remain faithful to Christ in those hard times, in those times of suffering, in those times where we don't understand why we're having to go through this? And I just got a couple of simple things down, and I'll be honest with you guys, I hope I'm doing this topic a good service. But it's simple. How do you remain faithful to Christ in hard times? Well, first you got to realize that God is sovereign. He's sovereign. He sees all and he knows all. And he's with you in your suffering. He's present. He's sovereign and he's present. He's with you in your suffering. He's ultimately in charge of everything. Stand firm in that. Stand firm in that faith, that truth. And then you just got to believe him. It's like a kid who just simply believes mom and dad. I'm not going to touch the stove because I trust mom. And mom said, don't touch the stove. It will hurt you. So I'm a child and I'm going to just trust mom. We're children of God. You just got to simply sometimes trust God. Trust that whatever is happening to you, whatever's happening to you in this moment, God can use it. He can use it. He can use it for your good and that he'll see you through it. And I know we use that scripture a lot, Romans 8:28, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. That's a truth, okay? But sometimes I don't want to hear that. Sometimes in my frustration, that's like when someone says that, I'm like, man, don't be real with me, okay? Like, quit being all Christianese, quit being, I want to be real here. So, yes, we understand that God can work all things for our good, but does that mean we just ignore and suppress our feelings of hopelessness and brokenness when we suffer? No, that's not relationship. We don't suppress it. We don't ignore it. What do? We just bring it to Jesus. We bring it to our Father. We bring it to him. We lay it at his feet, and we trust that somehow your ways are better than mine. You know more than I do, so you're going to take this brokenness. You're going to take this suffering. You're going to take this mess, and some way you're going to work it out for my good because I trust you're good. I know you didn't cause the suffering, but you're going to turn it around for my good. You're going to take it and you're going to use it. When we bring our brokenness to Jesus, that builds our faith, that purifies our faith into more genuine and stronger faith, because we develop a more intimate relationship with him. When we trust him with our suffering, when we trust that he is good and that he can take this thing that I'm suffering and he can use it to build me up and encourage me and empower me and restore me, he will reveal things about himself that we didn't know before. And our faith strengthens in that process of trust and healing. Whether it's a lesson learned from you or an opportunity for him to prove himself faithful to you, or whether it's for his glory and power to be displayed through you to others, when we go to Jesus, he helps us. Does that always mean that we'll get the answer that we want? No. Some of the Christians in Smyrna died. Physically died because of their faith. Jesus didn't promise to take away their troubles. He said it's coming, and he promised that he would see them through. And if they remained faithful, they would be victorious in the end. It says, "Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life." And then he ends it with, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death." The one who conquers, the one that stays faithful, that second death means complete separation. We're talking about hell. You won't be hurt by that. How can he promise this? Because he's the first and the last. He's the one who died but conquered death and came back to life. He's been through it all, and he's still standing. Whatever man can do to us, whatever this broken world can do to us, he has the ultimate authority to undo, even death. If we remain faithful, we will not be separated from him, but will live with him victorious forever. Worship team, you can come on up. Those of us who have never had to fear for our lives because of our faith can't fully appreciate what the words of Jesus meant to the church of Smyrna. In the days of tribulation that followed, the words of Jesus were a source of strength to the believers. History tells us that Polycarp, who was the elder bishop and pastor of the church in Smyrna, was shortly arrested after they received this letter. They escorted him into a stadium full of hostile Romans and Jews, and they tried to get him to renounce Jesus, saying, "Swear by the genius of Caesar, and we'll dismiss you." That's all you have to do, Polycarp. That's all you got to do. Polycarp answered in this way. Now remember, he's received this encouragement. He says, 86 years have I served him, and he never did me wrong. And how can I now blaspheme my king that has saved me? When they tried to intimidate him with animals, lions, and wild beasts, and threatened to be burned at the stake, Polycarp replied to them, "You threaten fire that burns for a moment and is soon extinguished. For you know nothing of the judgment to come and the fire of eternal punishment reserved for the wicked. But why delay? Bring what you wish." At that statement, the mob started to nail Polycarp to a stake. He stated, "He that gives me the strength to bear the fire will also give me power to remain unmoved on the pile." He clasped his hands behind him around the stake and prayed. After he said amen, the executioner lit the fire. Polycarp died with the assurance that he would not be hurt in the second death. Stand with me. The church of Smyrna was one of two churches, only two churches out of the seven, that received a letter without a rebuke or correction from Jesus. Instead, he commended them for suffering well under extreme persecution, and he encouraged them, stay faithful. When they were crushed, their faith, just like myrrh, released a sweet-smelling fragrance that captured the attention and the heart of God. Smyrna is the only town that still exists to this very day. It's now known as Izmir in present-day Turkey, and it's still home to a small but vibrant Christian community. Where some of those churches, their lampstand was put out, like the Church of Ephesus, the Church of Smyrna is still burning bright in Turkey. How do you suffer well for Christ? When we face troubles and tribulations, how do we respond? How do you suffer? How are you suffering well for Christ? Are you suffering well for Christ? If Jesus was writing a letter to us, would he praise us on how we face heat for our faith? Not just persecution, but how we respond to suffering. Does it push us further into his presence, or do we run and retreat? Because it's just too hot. Or I'm mad at you, God. The purity of our faith will depend on how we face the heat of the struggle.